There is something deeply sacred about this moment when we pause everything else and simply turn our hearts toward the presence of the Holy Spirit. Before words are spoken, before requests are made, before we even begin to ask for healing or peace or hope, there must first be a quiet surrender within the soul. It is in that surrender that everything begins to change. Because the Holy Spirit does not come where he is merely acknowledged in words, but where he is truly welcomed in the heart. Right now, even as these words are being spoken, there is an invitation going forth, not just into a room, not just into a gathering, but into the deepest places of human need. The Holy Spirit is not distant. He is near. He is closer than breath, closer than thought, closer than the very ache you feel inside your heart that you have never been able to explain to anyone else. And all that is required in this moment is a simple opening, a willingness to say, "Come." So I would ask you, wherever you are, to gently quiet your spirit, not striving, not struggling, just letting go. There is no need to pretend, no need to hide, no need to carry the weight of yesterday into this sacred moment. The Holy Spirit meets you exactly where you are, not where you think you should be. And even now, he is already moving through the places that words cannot reach. There are burdens that people carry for so long that they begin to feel like a part of who they are. But they are not who you are. There are fears that settle so deeply that they begin to feel permanent, but they are not permanent in the presence of God. And so as we begin, we simply invite him, not with complexity, not with ritual, but with sincerity. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Let those words settle, not just on the lips, but in the heart. Because when the Holy Spirit is welcomed, he does not come to condemn. He does not come to push away. He comes to embrace. He comes to reveal. He comes to heal. And often, he begins his work in the quietest way, softening what has become hardened, touching what has become numb, and awakening what has long been asleep inside the soul. You may not always feel something dramatic in the moment, but his presence is not measured by emotion alone. It is measured by transformation. And even now there is a gentle drawing taking place, as if something within you is being realigned, brought back into harmony, brought back into peace. That is the work of the Holy Spirit. Not rushed, not forced, but deeply intentional. And I sense this so strongly that there are hearts listening who have been waiting for a sign, waiting for a moment, waiting for something to break through the silence they have been living in. This is that moment. Not because of words, but because of presence. Because when the Holy Spirit steps into a life, nothing remains the same. So let him in, not partially, not cautiously, but fully. Even if your faith feels small, even if your understanding feels limited, even if your past feels heavy, none of that disqualifies you from his presence. In fact, it is often in those very places that he chooses to reveal himself most tenderly. Just breathe and let there be a quiet yes rising within you. A yes that does not need to be loud. A yes that simply opens the door of the heart. Holy Spirit, we welcome you. Come and stay. Now in this atmosphere of quiet surrender, we move gently into the deepest need of the human heart, the need for healing. Not just outward healing that can be seen, but the hidden healing that only the Holy Spirit can touch. There are wounds that people carry that never show on the surface. Wounds from words that were spoken long ago and still echo in the mind. Wounds from disappointments that reshaped expectations. Wounds from loss, from betrayal, from silence when comfort was needed most. And yet, none of these places are beyond the reach of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is not only present to comfort, he is present to restore. And restoration is not a surface work. It goes deeper than memory. It goes into the places where pain has settled and where hearts have learned to quietly survive rather than truly live. But survival is not the fullness of what has been promised. There is healing that reaches beyond survival into wholeness. So even now, I want you to understand something very tender and very important. You are seen in those hidden places. Not just the places you show to others, but the places you have learned to keep covered. The Holy Spirit does not avoid those areas. He gently steps into them with understanding that no human hand can replicate. And I feel this so clearly. There are those listening who have learned to live with pain so long that it feels familiar. But familiarity is not healing. And the Holy Spirit is not calling you to continue carrying what has already begun to weigh down your spirit. He is calling you into release. Not forced release, but willing release. The kind that happens when the heart finally says, I don't want to carry this anymore. There is a softness in his presence. And yet there is also power. Power to reach into memories that still sting. Power to touch emotions that have been buried because they felt too heavy to face. Power to bring light into places that have felt dark for far too long. And where the Holy Spirit brings light, darkness cannot remain the same. You may find that healing does not always come in the way you expect. Sometimes it is not a sudden removal of pain, but a deep calming within the soul that changes how you carry it. Sometimes it is not forgetting, but finally no longer being bound by what you remember. That is also healing. That is the gentle work of the Spirit of God within a human life. And I want you to know that there is no shame in needing healing. There is no weakness in acknowledging that something inside needs to be restored. In fact, it is in that honesty that healing begins. Because the Holy Spirit does not work with pretension. He works with truth. Where there is truth, there is openness. And where there is openness, there is transformation. So right now in this moment, I would encourage you to simply let go. Not by striving, not by struggling, but by yielding. Let those memories, those burdens, those silent aches be placed into the hands of the one who understands them completely. You do not have to explain them perfectly. You do not have to organize them. You simply have to release them. And as you do, there is a gentle reassurance that begins to rise within the spirit. A quiet awareness that you are not alone in this process. Healing is not something you walk through by yourself when the Holy Spirit is present. He walks through it with you, step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment. Even now there is a deep work taking place in hearts that cannot be fully described with words. A mending, a softening, a restoration that is beginning at the deepest level. And so receive this moment of healing, not as something you earn, but as something you allow. For the Holy Spirit is here, and He is healing you now. And now as the heart begins to open and healing begins to gently take its place, there is something else the human soul deeply longs for. Peace. Not the kind of peace the world offers, which depends on circumstances and changes with every season of life, but a deeper peace, a steady peace, a peace that holds the heart even when everything around it feels uncertain. There are many who are listening right now who have been living with unrest on the inside. On the outside, life may appear composed, but within there is a constant stirring. Thoughts that do not settle, worries that return again and again, anxieties that seem to rise without warning. And I want you to know that the Holy Spirit is deeply aware of that inner struggle. He is not distant from it. He is present within it, ready to bring calm where there has been turmoil. The peace of the Holy Spirit is not fragile. It is not easily shaken. It is not dependent on whether problems disappear or circumstances immediately change. It is a supernatural peace that can sit right in the middle of difficulty and still remain unshaken. And I feel this so strongly. There are hearts that have forgotten what it feels like to be still on the inside. But the Holy Spirit has not forgotten you. Even now, as you listen, there is an invitation to lay down what has been weighing on your mind. The constant replay of concerns, the questions about tomorrow, the regrets of yesterday, the uncertainty of what lies ahead. All of these things can quietly drain the strength of a soul when carried alone. But you were never meant to carry them alone. So I gently encourage you to surrender them. Not with resistance, not with fear, but with trust. There is a place in the presence of the Holy Spirit where the mind can finally rest. It is not escape, it is refuge. It is not denial, it is divine assurance. It is the quiet knowing that you are held, even when you do not understand everything happening around you. And as you begin to release those inner burdens, something beautiful begins to happen. The noise begins to soften, the racing thoughts begin to slow, the heaviness in the chest begins to ease. It may not always feel dramatic at first, but it is real. The peace of the Holy Spirit often comes like a gentle wave, not forcing itself, but gradually covering everything that once felt chaotic. There are situations that cannot be controlled, questions that do not have immediate answers, and paths that are still unfolding. But peace is not the absence of those things. Peace is the presence of God within them. And when the Holy Spirit brings His peace, even the unknown becomes less frightening because you are no longer facing it alone. I want you to understand this deeply. Peace is not something you have to achieve. It is something you receive. It is a gift that flows from surrender. And sometimes the greatest breakthrough is not when everything changes around you, but when something changes within you. So right now, allow that inner resistance to loosen. Let the tension you have been carrying begin to release. Let the Holy Spirit quiet what you cannot quiet on your own. You do not need to strive for it. You simply need to be open to it. And there is a stillness that is beginning to settle even now. A sacred calm that reaches beyond understanding. A peace that gently whispers that you are safe in His presence. A peace that reassures your heart that you are not forgotten, not abandoned, not overlooked. Let that peace rise within you now, and let it remain. And now, as that gentle peace begins to settle within the heart, there is something else the Holy Spirit lovingly restores in the human spirit: hope. Hope is such a precious thing, and yet it is often the first thing that begins to fade when life becomes heavy. When prayers seem unanswered, when waiting becomes long, when disappointment begins to gather, hope can feel like it is slipping quietly away. And yet, even in those places, the Holy Spirit is not finished with you. There are those listening right now who have said in their hearts, I don't know if things will ever change. I don't know if anything good is still ahead of me. And I want you to know that the Holy Spirit has not allowed your life to reach its end. What feels like delay is not denial. What feels like silence is not absence. There is still purpose unfolding, even when it cannot yet be seen. Hope is not a fragile imagination. True hope is a living strength placed within the Spirit by God Himself. It is what allows a person to keep moving forward when everything around them says stop. It is what keeps the heart open when discouragement tries to close it. And when the Holy Spirit begins to renew hope, something begins to lift from the inside that no human encouragement alone can produce. Even now, I sense there are hearts that have grown tired, not just physically tired, but deeply inwardly weary, tired of waiting, tired of believing, tired of praying the same prayers with no visible change. But I want you to understand something very tender. The Holy Spirit does not shame your weariness. He meets you in it. And instead of pushing you beyond your strength, He gently breathes new strength into you. There is a renewing that begins in the presence of the Holy Spirit that cannot be manufactured or forced. It often begins quietly, like a small light flickering again in a place that felt dark for too long. It is the return of expectation, the quiet rising again of belief that tomorrow can be different from today. Not because circumstances have yet changed, but because something within you has been touched again by God. And I feel this so strongly. There are dreams that have been buried, visions that were once alive in your heart but now feel distant. The Holy Spirit is not only concerned with your survival, He is concerned with your destiny. He knows what was placed within you before disappointment tried to silence it, and He is able to breathe upon it again. Hope does not always return in a rush. Sometimes it returns in a whisper, a gentle thought that maybe you are not forgotten, a quiet reassurance that maybe your story is not over, a soft stirring within the spirit that begins to say, try again. And that whisper is sacred because it does not come from human reasoning alone. It comes from the renewing presence of the Holy Spirit. So even now I encourage you not to dismiss that small stirring if you feel it rising within you. Do not push it away because of past disappointment. Do not silence it because of previous delay. Let it remain. Let it grow. Let it take root again in your heart. Because when the Holy Spirit restores hope, He does not restore it halfway. He restores it with depth. He restores it with strength. He restores it in a way that begins to reshape how you see your future. And I want to speak this gently over every listening heart. Your future is still held by God. Your life is still under His care. And there is still more ahead of you than what you have already walked through. So receive this renewal now, not as something imagined, but as something given. Let hope rise again within you, and let it live. And now as hope begins to rise again within the heart, there is another deep work the Holy Spirit gently does in His people. He does not only heal what is broken and restore what is weary, He also breaks the chains that have held the spirit in unseen bondage. There are many who are listening who may not even fully recognize the weight they have been carrying, because these chains are often quiet, internal, and long accepted. Chains of doubt, chains of despair, chains of inner defeat that slowly convince a person to stop believing for anything greater. And yet the Holy Spirit has never intended for your spirit to live bound in that way. There is a freedom that belongs to the children of God, a freedom not dependent on circumstance, not dependent on human approval, and not dependent on past outcomes. It is a freedom that begins within, where the Holy Spirit speaks directly to the deepest places of limitation and says, this is not where you remain. There are thoughts that have been repeated so often in the mind that they begin to feel like truth. Thoughts like, nothing will ever change, or I have gone too far, or there is no way forward for me. And I want you to understand something very clearly in this moment. Those voices are not the voice of the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit never leads you into despair. He never pushes you into hopelessness. He never convinces you that you are beyond the reach of God's grace. Even now, I sense there are those who have been silently struggling with doubt, not just doubt about circumstances, but doubt about themselves, doubt about whether they are still worthy of God's touch, doubt about whether change is truly possible for them. And that kind of doubt can become like a chain around the heart, slowly restricting the ability to believe, to trust, to move forward. But the Holy Spirit is here to break that chain, not by force but by truth. Because where truth enters, deception must leave. And the truth of God is this: you are not forgotten, you are not abandoned, and you are not disqualified from His presence. There is also a heaviness of despair that some have quietly carried for a long time. A sense of inner resignation where the heart says, I will just accept things as they are. But I want to gently tell you that acceptance of defeat is not the will of God for your life. The Holy Spirit does not bring resignation, He brings restoration. He does not bring inner collapse, He brings inner strength. And I feel this very strongly. There are chains that are not visible to others, but they are deeply felt within. Chains of fear that limit decisions. Chains of guilt that replay the past over and over again. Chains of emotional exhaustion that make even simple steps feel heavy. But the presence of the Holy Spirit does not negotiate with those chains. He breaks them, not always with noise, not always with dramatic expression, but with a divine authority that reaches into the spirit and begins to undo what has held you bound. And in that moment, something begins to shift internally. The weight that once felt normal begins to feel unnecessary. The limitation that once felt permanent begins to loosen. The inner voice of defeat begins to lose its power. And so I speak this gently over every heart listening. You do not have to remain in what has kept you small, silent, or bound. There is a breaking taking place even now in the unseen places of your life. A breaking of doubt. A breaking of despair. A breaking of every inner lie that has tried to define your future. Receive that freedom now and walk in it. And now, as that freedom begins to settle within the heart, there is a beautiful and deeply important final movement of the Holy Spirit in the life of a believer. Guidance. Because it is not enough to be healed and not enough to be strengthened for a moment. The Holy Spirit desires to walk with you every day, in every decision, in every direction, and in every unseen detail of your life. There are many who have experienced moments of spiritual touch, moments where the presence of God felt very real, and yet afterwards still found themselves wondering how to walk forward in daily life. And I want you to understand that the Holy Spirit is not only present for extraordinary moments, He is present for ordinary steps. He is present in the quiet decisions, in the private thoughts, in the simple choices that shape your future more than you may realize. There is a tenderness in His guidance. He does not rush you. He does not overwhelm you. He leads you gently, often one step at a time. And sometimes people miss His direction because they are expecting something dramatic, when in reality, His voice is often the quiet impression within the heart that says, this is the way, walk in it. And even now I sense there are those listening who have been standing at crossroads, uncertain about direction, uncertain about timing, uncertain about what step to take next. And that uncertainty can feel heavy when you try to carry it alone. But the Holy Spirit was never meant to be distant from your decisions. He desires to be intimately involved in every part of your journey. When you begin to walk with the Holy Spirit daily, something changes within you. Confusion begins to lose its authority. Anxiety over decisions begins to soften. The pressure to figure everything out on your own begins to lift. Because you are no longer navigating life alone, you are being led. And I want to gently remind you of something very important. Guidance from the Holy Spirit is never meant to confuse you further. It brings clarity. It brings peace with direction. Even when the path is not fully visible, there is a settled assurance within the Spirit that you are not walking blindly. There are moments when He will guide you away from what looks appealing but is not aligned with your purpose. There are moments when He will gently redirect your steps, not to limit you, but to protect you. And there are moments when He will simply ask you to trust Him without needing to see the entire outcome in advance. And this is where true relationship with the Holy Spirit deepens, not in control, but in trust. Not in knowing everything ahead of time, but in knowing the one who goes ahead of you. Even now, I feel this so strongly. There are those who have been trying to make decisions with a heavy heart, carrying fear of making the wrong choice. But the Holy Spirit is able to bring such peace into your inner being, that even the process of decision-making becomes lighter. Not because the responsibility disappears, but because you are no longer carrying it alone. So I encourage you, even as you move forward from this moment, to begin to acknowledge Him in your daily life, in the small things and in the great things, in the questions and in the answers, in the beginnings and in the endings. Let there be a continual awareness that you are being led, and as you do, you will begin to notice something beautiful unfolding. A quiet confidence replacing confusion, a steady peace replacing uncertainty, a gentle assurance that your steps are not random but guided. Because the Holy Spirit does not only heal you, restore you, and free you. He walks with you, step by step, day by day, moment by moment, and now walk forward in His guidance, and never walk alone again.